The sound of a single gunshot tore through the morning air as Dr. Alina O'Malley pressed her back against the rough wooden wall of her small medical office, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sweetwater Creek, Colorado, 1875, a place where civilization and wilderness collided in ways that still surprised her, even after 3 years of practicing medicine in this dusty frontier town. The commotion outside grew louder, boots pounding on wooden planks, men shouting, a horse whinnying in distress. Alina took a steadying breath, straightening her simple blue dress and checking that her chestnut hair remained properly pinned. As the town's only doctor, she'd learned to steel herself for whatever emergency might burst through her door at any moment. When the door finally slammed open, it wasn't what she expected. A tall man with a weathered face and intense hazel eyes stood in her doorway, cradling something small wrapped in a worn leather jacket. Blood stained his shirt, though he showed no signs of pain. "Doc," he said, his voice deep and urgent, "need your help." He pulled back the edge of the jacket to reveal a tiny, red-faced infant, no more than a few weeks old. Alina's medical instincts took over immediately. "Bring the baby here," she instructed, clearing space on her examination table. Only once the child was settled did she properly look at the man who'd brought it. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and a serious expression that couldn't quite hide the kindness in his eyes. "I'm Quinn Harrington," he said simply, "Doctor." "Alina O'Malley," she replied, already examining the infant. "Is this your child?" "No, madam. Found her abandoned at a camp about 10 miles out. Looks like her mama didn't make it." His voice carried the weight of having seen too much death. The baby girl was underweight but otherwise healthy, waving tiny fists in the air. Alina felt the familiar ache in her chest, the one that came whenever she treated a child. The memory of Dr. Wilcox's words 3 years ago in Boston still haunted her. "I'm sorry, Miss O'Malley, but given your condition, you will never bear children of your own." "She needs milk," Alina said, pushing the memory away. "And proper care," Quinn nodded, "figured as much." Thought about taking her to the orphanage in Denver, but he hesitated. Seemed too far for one so small. Alina knew what that meant. The journey to Denver was dangerous enough for healthy adults. For a newborn, it could be fatal. "She can stay here tonight," she decided. "I'll arrange something more permanent tomorrow." Quinn's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Appreciate it, Doc." He started toward the door but paused. "Those shots earlier, there's trouble in town. Gang of outlaws rode in looking for someone. Might want to keep your door locked tonight." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Alina with an orphaned infant and a lingering impression of the most intriguing man she'd met since arriving in Colorado. That night, as she fed the baby with a cloth soaked in diluted cow's milk, Alina found herself wondering about Quinn Harrington. He wasn't like the other cowboys who passed through Sweetwater Creek. There was something thoughtful in his manner, something that spoke of education and refinement beneath the rough exterior. 3 sharp knocks on her back door startled her from her thoughts. With the baby cradled in one arm, she cautiously approached, relief washing over her when she saw Quinn's face through the small window. "Came to check on the little one," he explained when she let him in. In the lamplight, she noticed a fresh cut above his right eye. "You're injured," she observed. "It's nothing." Alina gave him a stern look. "I'm the doctor here, Mr. Harrington. Sit down and let me tend to that while you tell me what happened." To her surprise, he complied without argument, settling into a chair while she gathered supplies with her free hand. "Those outlaws I mentioned," he explained. "They're the Blackwell gang. Been terrorizing settlements across 3 territories. They think I know where their latest loot is hidden." "And do you?" she asked, handing him the baby while she prepared to clean his wound, his lips quirked into a half-smile. "No, but they killed a friend of mine last month. I've been tracking them ever since." Alina paused, antiseptic-soaked cloth in hand. "You're a bounty hunter." "Former Pinkerton agent," he corrected. "Now I just do what needs doing." She gently cleaned the cut, noticing how naturally he held the infant who had fallen asleep against his chest. "Is that why you were out where you found her, tracking the Blackwell gang?" Quinn nodded. "Found signs of a small family traveling alone by the time I got there." He trailed off, looking down at the sleeping baby. Too late for her folks. Looked like they'd been dead a day or so, but somehow she survived. Alina's throat tightened with emotion. "She's a fighter, then." "Like her doctor," Quinn said softly. Their eyes met briefly, and Alina felt a strange flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with her medical condition. She quickly returned to bandaging his cut. "You'll need stitches if you want to avoid a scar." "I've got plenty already, Doc." "One more won't matter." Against her better judgment, Alina found herself saying, "You could stay here tonight. It's safer than the hotel with those men looking for you." Quinn studied her face for a long moment. "Wouldn't want to bring trouble to your door." "Trouble found me the moment you walked in with that baby," she replied with a small smile. "Besides, I took an oath to help those in need." He stayed that night, sleeping on a pallet in her small sitting room while Alina kept the baby in her bedroom. In the morning, she found him already awake, boiling coffee on her stove. "Hope you don't mind," he said, offering her a steaming cup. Alina accepted it gratefully. "Not at all." She checked on the baby, who was sleeping peacefully in a makeshift cradle. "What happens now, Mr. Harrington?" "Quinn," he corrected, "and I think that depends on what's best for her." He nodded toward the infant. "The nearest orphanage is in Denver, as you said." Alina hesitated. "But I've been thinking. Mrs. Wilkins just lost her baby last month. She and her husband have been devastated. They might welcome the chance to take in this little one." Quinn considered this. "Good people, the best. Robert Wilkins is the town blacksmith. They've been trying for a child for 5 years." He nodded slowly. "Seems right, then. I should leave town soon anyway." "The Blackwells won't give up looking for me." Alina felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "Will you at least stay until we know the Wilkins will take her?" His eyes softened. "Course I will, Doc." Later that morning, with the baby freshly bathed and wrapped in a clean blanket Alina had quickly sewn from an old sheet, they walked together to the Wilkins home at the edge of town. Alina was acutely aware of Quinn beside her, his tall frame and watchful eyes making her feel safer than she had in years. Sarah Wilkins opened the door, her eyes red-rimmed from weeks of grief. When she saw the tiny bundle in Alina's arms, her hand flew to her mouth. "Sarah," Alina said gently, "this little girl needs a mother. I thought perhaps—" "May I?" Sarah whispered, holding out trembling arms. Alina carefully transferred the baby, and the moment Sarah held her, something in her expression transformed. The grief didn't disappear, but it softened, making room for something new. Robert appeared behind his wife, his blacksmith's hands looking oversized and awkward as he reached out to touch the baby's cheek with surprising gentleness. "Where did she come from?" Quinn explained briefly, omitting the details of the Blackwell gang. When he finished, Robert and Sarah exchanged a look of perfect understanding. "We'll take her," Robert said firmly. "Raise her as our own." "She's a blessing," Sarah added, tears spilling down her cheeks. "What's her name?" Alina and Quinn looked at each other. "She doesn't have one yet," Alina admitted. Sarah studied the baby's face. "Hope," she decided. "Her name is Hope." As they walked back toward town, Alina felt both lightened and somehow emptier. "You did a good thing bringing her here," she told Quinn. "We did," he corrected. "Though I reckon I should move on now." Before Alina could respond, a shout came from down the street. 3 men on horseback were approaching fast, guns already drawn. "Harrington," one of them bellowed. Quinn swore under his breath, pushing Alina toward the nearest building, the general store. "Get inside," he ordered, drawing his own pistol. "You can't face them alone," she protested. "I won't risk you getting hurt. Go." Bullets splintered the wooden post beside them, and Quinn shoved her through the store's entrance before turning to face the approaching riders. Inside, Alina found herself among startled customers, and the proprietor, Mr. Finch, who was already reaching for the shotgun he kept under the counter. "Stay down, folks," he called. But Alina couldn't just hide while Quinn faced 3 armed men. Moving to the window, she peered out to see him ducking behind a water trough, exchanging fire with the outlaws who had dismounted and taken positions around the street. "Sheriff's out of town, mister," Finch said grimly, coming to stand beside her with his shotgun. "Who are those men?" "The Blackwell gang," Alina replied. "They're after Mr. Harrington." Mr. Finch's expression hardened. "Well, they picked the wrong town." Without hesitation, he stepped onto the porch and fired a warning shot into the air. "This is private property, boys. Suggest you move along." One of the outlaws turned and fired at the store, sending everyone ducking for cover. But the distraction had given Quinn the opportunity he needed. He managed to hit one of the men in the shoulder, while another citizen from the barber shop across the street joined the fight with his own rifle. The gunfight was brief but intense. Within minutes, one outlaw was wounded, another surrendering, and the third had fled on horseback. As the dust settled, Alina rushed out to find Quinn leaning heavily against the water trough, blood seeping through his shirt at the shoulder. "Inside, now," she ordered, helping him to his feet. "Mr. Finch, can you and the others secure these men until the sheriff returns?" "Gladly, Doc," Finch replied, already organizing the townspeople. In her clinic, Alina cut away Quinn's shirt to reveal a bullet wound that had thankfully passed clean through his shoulder. "You're lucky," she told him as she cleaned the wound. "An inch to the right and it would have hit an artery." Quinn winced as she applied antiseptic. "Doesn't feel lucky." "Well, you're alive and those men are captured. I'd call that fortunate." She began stitching the wound with practiced precision. "Though I suppose this means you won't be leaving town today after all." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. "Guess not," he agreed quietly. Over the next 2 weeks, as Quinn recovered in a room Alina arranged for him at the boarding house, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, she would check his wound, and each afternoon, he would accompany her on her rounds to patients who lived outside town. In the evenings, they often found themselves sharing dinner at the small cafe or sometimes in Alina's modest quarters behind her clinic. They visited Hope nearly every day, watching with satisfaction as she thrived under Sarah's loving care. The baby had already gained weight, her cheeks filling out, her eyes a striking blue, becoming more alert and curious. "You're good with children," Quinn observed one evening as they walked back from the Wilkins home. "Ever think of having your own?" The question struck at Alina's most private pain. She hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I can't have children. A childhood illness left me unable to conceive." Quinn was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "That must be hard, especially in your line of work." "It was harder when I first learned of it," she admitted. "It's partly why I came west. In Boston, a woman my age 28 is considered a spinster already. Add in the inability to have children and my prospects for marriage were essentially non-existent." "Boston's loss," Quinn said simply. Alina felt her cheeks warm. "What about you? No wife waiting somewhere?" "No, my work with the Pinkertons didn't leave much room for family life." He looked thoughtful. "Though I've been thinking lately that might be changing." Before Alina could ask what he meant, they reached her clinic. A note had been pinned to the door, the handwriting immediately recognizable as belonging to Sheriff Taylor, who had returned to town 3 days after the gunfight. "What is it?" Quinn asked, noting her concerned expression as she read. "A child with fever in one of the outlying farms." "I need to go right away." She was already calculating what supplies she would need. "I'll saddle the horses," Quinn offered without hesitation. They rode out as the sun was setting, the journey to the Peterson farm taking over an hour in the growing darkness. 8-year-old Timothy Peterson had developed a dangerous fever following a fall into the creek days earlier. Alina worked through the night, applying cool compresses, administering medicine, and monitoring his breathing while his anxious parents hovered nearby. Quinn made himself useful, boiling water, preparing broth, and keeping the fire stoked. Alina couldn't help but notice how smoothly they worked together, anticipating each other's needs without words. By dawn, Timothy's fever had broken. As the boy finally slept peacefully, Alina stepped outside for a moment of fresh air, exhaustion weighing on her. Quinn followed, offering her a cup of coffee. "You saved that boy's life," he said. Alina shook her head. "We don't know that yet, but he has a fighting chance now." "You give everyone a fighting chance, Alina." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it sounded right in his deep voice. "It's why you're out here instead of in some fancy Boston practice." She smiled tiredly. "And why are you here, Quinn Harrington, still tracking outlaws?" He was quiet for a long moment, watching the sunrise paint the distant mountains in gold and pink. "I've been thinking about settling down, finding a place where I could do some good without a gun in my hand. Sweetwater Creek could use a man like you," she said carefully. "Sheriff Taylor's getting on in years. He mentioned looking for a deputy." Quinn turned to face her, his expression serious. "Would you want me to stay, Alina?" The directness of the question took her breath away. Yes, I would." He stepped closer, one hand gently touching her cheek. "Then I will." Their first kiss was tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, Alina felt dizzy with something that had nothing to do with her night without sleep. "We should get back," she said softly. "I need to check on Timothy." Quinn nodded, but his eyes remained on hers, filled with a promise that made her heart race. The ride back to town later that day was filled with stolen glances and new possibilities. Quinn spoke of his years with the Pinkertons, of growing up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, of his dreams of perhaps starting a horse ranch someday. Alina shared stories of medical school, of the professors who had scoffed at a woman seeking education, of her determination to prove them wrong. Within days, Quinn had accepted the position as deputy sheriff, and within weeks, he had become an integral part of Sweetwater Creek. The remaining members of the Blackwell gang were captured by a U.S. Marshal passing through, removing the last obstacle to Quinn making the town his permanent home. As summer bloomed across the Colorado landscape, so too did Alina and Quinn's relationship. They took to riding out on Sunday afternoons, exploring the wilderness around Sweetwater Creek, sometimes bringing a picnic to share beside the river that gave the town its name. On one such afternoon in late July, as they sat beneath the shade of a cottonwood tree, Quinn took her hand in his. "I've been thinking," he began. "A dangerous pastime," she teased. He smiled. "Maybe so, but I've been thinking about us, Alina, about the future." Her heart quickened. "And what conclusions have you reached, Deputy Harrington?" "That I love you," he said simply. "That I want to build a life with you if you'll have me." Alina's throat tightened with emotion. "Quinn, you know I can't give you children." "I'm not asking for children," he said firmly. "I'm asking for you. A family isn't just about having babies, Alina. It's about choosing to face life together come what may." Tears blurred her vision. "I love you too," she whispered. "And yes, I'll have you." They were married in September, a simple ceremony in Sweetwater Creek's small church. Sarah Wilkins stood as Alina's matron of honor, baby Hope now 6 months old and thriving cradled in her arms. Sheriff Taylor stood with Quinn, beaming with fatherly pride at the deputy who had quickly become like a son to him. Alina wore a new dress of ivory satin that Mrs. Finch had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair instead of an expensive veil. Quinn looked handsome and slightly uncomfortable in a new suit, his normally tousled hair slicked back for the occasion. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, the entire town erupted in cheers. Sweetwater Creek had taken them both in as outsiders and now celebrated them as their own. Life settled into a new pattern. Quinn continued as deputy while starting a small horse breeding operation on land they purchased just outside town. Alina's medical practice thrived, her reputation for skill and compassion spreading throughout the territory. They converted the rooms behind her clinic into a comfortable home, adding a second bedroom that Quinn insisted would make a perfect study for Alina's growing collection of medical books. But sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, Alina would stand in that empty room and wonder what it might have been like to set up a nursery instead. Winter came early that year, blanketing Sweetwater Creek in snow by late October. As the temperatures dropped, Alina found herself busier than ever, treating frostbite, winter coughs, and the inevitable injuries that came with icy conditions. One particularly bitter night in December, with Quinn away helping the sheriff escort a prisoner to Denver, Alina was awakened by urgent knocking. Wrapping herself in a shawl, she opened the door to find Robert Wilkins, his face tight with worry. "It's Sarah," he said without preamble. "And Hope. They're both sick. Sarah insisted I wait until morning to fetch you, but Hope's getting worse." Alina dressed quickly, gathering her medical bag and following Robert through the snow-covered streets. At the Wilkins home, she found Sarah pale and weak in bed, while 9-month-old Hope burned with fever in her cradle nearby. "Influenza," Alina diagnosed grimly after examining them both, "and it's hit Hope particularly hard." For the next 3 days, Alina barely left the Wilkins household, fighting to save both mother and child. Sarah began to improve by the second day, but Hope's condition worsened. Her tiny body struggled for each breath, her fever refusing to break despite all of Alina's efforts. On the morning of the 4th day, Alina sat beside Hope's cradle, exhausted beyond measure, silently praying as she placed yet another cool compress on the baby's forehead. She had tried everything in her medical knowledge and now felt utterly helpless. "Don't you dare give up," came a voice from the doorway. Alina looked up to find Quinn standing there, snow melting from his coat, his face haggard from hard riding. He crossed the room in 3 strides and knelt beside her, taking in Hope's condition with a quick glance. "I don't know what else to do," Alina admitted, her voice breaking. "I've tried everything." Quinn took her hand. "Then we'll try something else. What about that experimental treatment you were reading about, the one from that German doctor, cold water immersion?" Alina shook her head. "It's risky, Quinn. Her heart is already weak. But if her fever doesn't break soon..." He didn't need to finish the thought. They both knew Hope wouldn't survive another day like this. Alina took a deep breath. "Help me prepare a bath. Not too cold, just cool enough to bring the fever down gradually." Together, they worked quickly, filling a small tub with tepid water. With infinite care, Quinn helped Alina lower the feverish infant into the water, supporting her head while Alina monitored her pulse and breathing. Hope cried weakly at first, then grew alarmingly quiet. Just as Alina was about to lift her out, the baby's eyes opened clearer than they had been in days. "Her fever's dropping," Alina whispered, hardly daring to hope. They repeated the treatment every 2 hours throughout the day and night. By morning, Hope's fever had broken completely. She took her first full feeding in days, and when she gripped Alina's finger with surprising strength, Alina finally allowed herself to believe the child would survive. Sarah, now recovering herself, wept with relief when Alina delivered the news. "You saved her," she said, clutching Alina's hand. "I can never repay you." "Seeing her well is payment enough," Alina replied, though exhaustion made her voice waver. Quinn practically carried her home, insisting she sleep while he kept watch over her. She was too tired to argue, falling into a deep slumber that lasted nearly 18 hours. When she finally awoke, she found Quinn sitting beside their bed, a strange expression on his face. "What is it?" she asked, sitting up. "Is Hope all right?" "Hope is fine," he assured her. "But something happened while you were sleeping. A rider came through town with a message for the sheriff. There was a stagecoach accident about 15 miles north. The sheriff asked me to go help." Alina was already reaching for her clothes. "Were there injuries? Why didn't you wake me?" "Because you needed rest," Quinn said firmly. "And yes, there were some injuries, but nothing life-threatening. Most of the passengers continued on to Denver with another coach." He hesitated. "Except for one." Only then did Alina notice the bundle in the cradle they kept for Hope's visits, a cradle that should have been empty. Pushing aside the blanket, she gasped at the sight of a sleeping infant, perhaps 3 months old. "His mother died in the accident," Quinn explained quietly. His father died 2 months ago of typhoid. There was no one else. The other passengers were continuing to California, no one able to take responsibility for an orphan baby. Alina stared at the sleeping child, then back at Quinn. So you brought him here, just for now, Quinn said quickly. Until we can arrange something more permanent. Maybe the Petersons? They've been talking about wanting more children. But Alina couldn't tear her eyes away from the baby's peaceful face. Without thinking, she reached down and lifted him into her arms. He stirred slightly, then settled against her chest with a soft sigh that seemed to reach directly into her heart. "What's his name?" she whispered. "Samuel," Quinn said. "Samuel James Turner, according to the papers his mother was carrying." Alina touched the baby's soft cheek. "Hello, Samuel," she murmured. Quinn watched her, his expression growing tender. "The Petersons would give him a good home," he said again, but with less conviction. Alina met his eyes. "Or we could." The words hung between them, fragile and momentous. "Alina," Quinn said carefully, "are you sure? I know how much it hurt you when Hope went to the Wilkins. If we take in Samuel temporarily and then have to give him up." "What if it wasn't temporary?" she asked, her heart pounding. "What if we adopted him, made him ours legally?" "I know it's not the same as having our own child, but it would be our child," Quinn interrupted, moving to sit beside her on the bed. "In every way that matters." Alina felt tears well in her eyes. "Do you mean that?" "With all my heart." Quinn wrapped an arm around her shoulders, looking down at the baby they both now held. "Though I should warn you, I've already changed him twice. The boy has an impressive aim." Alina laughed through her tears. "I'm a doctor, Quinn. I think I can handle a little misdirected urine." Samuel chose that moment to wake, blinking up at them with curious brown eyes. He didn't cry, just studied their faces with a solemn expression that soon gave way to a toothless smile. "I think he approves of the arrangement," Quinn said softly. That spring, as wildflowers bloomed across the Colorado foothills, Alina and Quinn Harrington formally adopted Samuel James Harrington. The entire town celebrated with them, none more joyfully than the Wilkins family, who promised that Hope and Samuel would grow up as the best of friends. On a perfect morning in May, almost exactly a year after Quinn had first walked into her clinic with an orphaned baby, Alina sat on the porch of their new home, a comfortable house Quinn had built on their small ranch just outside town. Samuel, now 7 months old, played on a blanket at her feet, reaching for the colorful wooden blocks Quinn had carved for him. Quinn emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth after tending to their growing herd of horses. He paused, taking in the sight of his wife and son in the morning sunlight, a smile spreading across his face. "What are you thinking?" Alina asked as he joined them on the porch. "That a doctor once told you you'd never have a child," he said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "Yet here we are." Alina leaned against his shoulder, watching Samuel happily gnawing on a block. "Here we are indeed. Any regrets?" Quinn asked, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Not a single one," she replied truthfully, "though I was thinking." "Dangerous pastime," he teased, echoing her words from nearly a year ago. She smiled. "Perhaps, but I was thinking that Samuel might like a sister someday. Sheriff Taylor mentioned another stagecoach coming through next week. You never know who might need a home." Quinn laughed, pulling her close. "Dr. Harrington, are you suggesting we make a habit of taking in every orphan child who crosses our path?" "Not everyone," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Just the ones who need us." "Well then," Quinn said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "I suppose we'd better start adding on to the house." As the morning sun bathed them in golden light, Alina closed her eyes in contentment. Life had taken her on an unexpected journey, from the rigid society of Boston to this wild, beautiful place where she had found not just purpose, but family. A family built not from blood but from choice, from love, and from the healing power of new beginnings. And as Samuel laughed, reaching his arms up to be held, Alina knew with absolute certainty that some dreams come true in ways you never expect and are all the more precious for it.